Good afternoon, everyone. Apologies for the delayed briefing. The Tynwald sitting went on a bit longer. Today's briefing takes place on International Nurses Day, and so today our focus is all about nursing. The 12th of May 2020 is the 200th anniversary of the birth of Florence Nightingale, someone who earned her fame as a frontline nurse in the Crimean War and is revered as the founder of modern nursing. She helped professionalise the role of nurses and set the early standards that we recognise today. She also established the Florence Nightingale School of Nursing, which also still exists today. I'm delighted to welcome back our Director of Nursing, Kath Quilliam, who will talk about Florence Nightingale's legacy and its relevance today. The Lady with the Lamp is how generations of school children have learned about Florence Nightingale. But that, as Kath will tell us, is only part of the story. But first, the latest daily COVID-19 statistics. The total number of tests undertaken stands at 3,853. The total number of concluded tests stands at 3,818. The number of outstanding test results is therefore 35. The total number of confirmed cases now stands at 331. That means there has been one new case since yesterday's update, and there are now 36 active cases. The history book's portrayal of Florence Nightingale moving among injured men in the field hospital got me thinking about the stereotypical images of nurses. Traditionally, we see them as devoted professionals with a great capacity to care for others, kind and patient. These qualities are important, whatever the circumstances, but it's worth reflecting on how the public perception of nurses has changed over the course of the last few months. Battle imagery is often used in relation to the coronavirus pandemic. So nurses are frontline troops in the battle with this deadly virus. In their personal protective equipment is their line of defence, their determination to defeat the enemy, their main weapon. Two of the most memorable images from the coverage of COVID-19 have been of nurses facing up to the challenge. One is a widely published photograph of a nurse who'd just removed her visor, mask and goggles after a long shift in ICU. Her face is marked by indentations from the PPE. Her skin is hot, sore and red. Her eyes tell of the pressure of nursing seriously sick patients. She is heading home, but already preparing for more of the same the next day. The second image which caught my eye is a cartoon-type graphic in which the virus, portrayed as a towering red sphere covered in those familiar protruding clumps, is shown mouth wide open, roaring at a nurse who is calmly looking up to it, taking it on. Such images will stay in people's minds forever. That's because without words, they tell the story of how healthcare workers, so often taken for granted, are now recognised for taking on an extraordinary challenge. The work that they are undertaking is relentless, hard-going, and not without risk. But most of all, these images convey the qualities of outstanding courage, perseverance, determination, and professionalism. They have increased our awareness of the expertise nurses bring to the job, the practical skills and mental strength required day in, day out, and how they have risen as individuals and as a profession to an unprecedented challenge. Nurses are getting on with the job, and we admire, respect, and thank them for that. Part of getting on with the job has been dealing with change. Nurses across all spheres have been asked to adapt swiftly to a global pandemic, the like of which many never expected to see. As we've reorganised our health services, many nurses have switched roles or been asked to work in different areas with new groups of patients. They've changed their working patterns, become part of new teams, found new ways of doing things, and in some cases taken on new responsibilities in less than ideal circumstances. They have played a key role in achieving our overall goal as an island community, preventing the health service from being overwhelmed. Adapting to change will be key in the next stage, when we begin to turn back on those services we had to stop while we dealt with COVID-19. Naturally, there will be a wave of demand as appointments and treatments resume for our patients. Once again, nurses will be on the front line helping to meet this demand, and once again there will be hurdles to clear and complex issues to face. The new normal is often talked about in the context of things not returning to the way they were once the pandemic is behind us. This is certainly true of our health services, and our nursing corps will be in the vanguard of that new era. I will now hand over to Kath Quilliam, our Director of Nursing, for her thoughts and reflections on today. Over to you, Kath.
Good evening, and thank you, Minister. Today is International Nurses Day, a significant event for nurses on the Isle of Man and around the world. It is held each year on May the 12th to mark the anniversary of Florence Nightingale's birth, and this year is special on her 200th anniversary. The founder of modern nursing, Florence Nightingale, has been the inspiration for generations of nurses over 2 centuries, and she remains so today. I want to dwell for a few moments on her legacy because it has a fascinating relevance for the profession today, and as we deal with the global health emergency. Commitment, compassion and care for patients were the essence of nursing when Florence tended the wounded soldiers in the Crimea in the mid-1850s. These qualities haven't changed and are displayed daily by our nurses in the health and care system. But Florence was much more than the lady with the lamp, as she's often portrayed. She was a serious academic who used her intellect and fierce sense of justice to bring about far-reaching reforms to the health system in the UK, saving countless civilian lives. In education, Florence Nightingale excelled in all subjects, but above all, mathematics. Her passion was statistics, and she is acknowledged as one of history's most important statisticians. A woman imbued with humanity and a sense of duty, but driven by data. She used the data she collected to find the causes of problems and to campaign for the resources to solve them. Her data showed that soldiers in the Crimea were dying of preventable diseases caused by infected water supply, rather than from their battle wounds. She pulled no punches in presenting her findings to politicians. A data-led approach drove her ideas for social reforms and the development of modern nursing. Improved living standards, better sanitation, the restructuring of Army medical services and the redesign of hospital buildings are all part of Florence's legacy. This didn't happen by accident. It was the result of data collection and analysis. She produced graphs, curves, and charts to make her case and a call for change. In the 21st century, nurses on the front line of our fight against COVID-19 are rightly praised and thanked for their dedication and compassion. But our response to the virus in areas from social distancing to testing regimes and the use of PPE are driven by science and hard data. Caring impulses and clear hard data are 2 sides of the same coin, and they are a winning formula. Our modelling of different infection spread scenarios, reorganisation of the hospital and health and social care services, staffing, supply lines and logistical plans are all data-driven, evidence-based and based on best practice. So on International Nurses Day, let's remember Florence Nightingale for her compassion and for her rigorous and unsentimental approach. Let's recognise the profound influence this approach has had on health services today, an approach which is serving us well indeed in this current challenge. Like Florence Nightingale, our nurses are highly skilled, multifaceted professionals, and the first global year of the nurse and midwife was designated by World Health Organization to recognise that. Its aim was to celebrate the advancement of the professions and to reflect on the skills, commitment, and clinical care nurses bring to positively impact on the citizens around the world. It was hoped that the year would raise the profile of nursing and midwifery, increasing levels of interdependence in many spheres of nursing, and highlight the diversity of the roles, especially to young people considering future career options. This, we hoped, would encourage recruitment and retention across all areas of nursing and midwifery. Nurses and midwives make up the largest number of health and social care workers. It was to be their year in the spotlight, a chance to showcase talents and expertise and a morale boost. We have done all this and more. Not in the way we intended, of course. A calendar of events carefully put together by a group of dedicated nurses and midwives who believe passionately in the cause have all but been abandoned. Our plans did include conferences, workshops, school and college visits, a family fun day, a TT-themed competition, an awards ceremony, and a nurses' lamplight walk. Most, but not all of these, have been postponed. Some we hope can still happen later in the year, but we do not look back. There could be no great sense of disappointment among nurses and midwives. We are focused in our role, responding to the coronavirus pandemic, which is likely to be the greatest challenge of most nurses' careers. It's an experience we are learning from now and will draw on for many years to come. There are positives, and we should recognise them, whilst mourning the tragic loss of life from COVID-19. A huge, unexpected, and frightening challenge arose, and we stepped up to meet it. Obstacles have been overcome with determination and focus. We have discovered deep reserves of patience, courage, resourcefulness, and team working, which we will not let go. We have learned to work in different ways to meet pressing needs. The adaptability and flexibility of colleagues has been simply outstanding. Finding out we can do things we never thought possible is an affirming lesson in life and is one of the clearest wins in a period which threatened to bring overwhelming loss. The restrictions have challenged us all at home and work, but there is a lasting satisfaction in getting on with the job and weathering the storm. That challenge makes us stronger as individuals, as a profession, and as a community. The experience has sometimes been draining, but it has also been uplifting. There have been moments of anguish, stress, frustration, but also feelings of relief, accomplishment, and even joy. The clapping for healthcare workers and key workers by the public on Thursday evening is a welcome act of recognition. It feels personal to many of us, makes us proud of each other, and perhaps more than anything else, binds us together with an invisible glue. Cohesion across the professions was a key aim of our special year, and this is one of our many achievements. But while taking heart from clapping, nurses and midwives don't want to be seen either as angels or heroes. They are professionals doing the job they trained to be, albeit in unprecedented circumstances, at pace and under pressure. Some have made great sacrifices, living in hospital accommodation away from their families to protect loved ones and their patients. The desire to help our fellow human beings to make a real difference to other people is what attracted us to the profession. While such motivations can fluctuate over time, this desire to help others has been brought back into sharp focus. Our roles and the incalculable value of our health service are crystal clear to all. We will continue doing whatever is required to beat the virus and help keep our community safe, because that is what we do. I am grateful for the opportunity to thank and salute all nurses and midwives across the spectrum of the professions. We may not have celebrated as planned, but we have paused to reflect on our roles and our contribution to meeting the global health emergency. We have showcased what we do in unique and unforgettable circumstances. It is turning out to be a year none of us will ever forget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kath. And of course, as you've rightly reminded us, not only is it International Nurses Day today, but it's also the year of the nurse and midwife this year. And I don't think at the start of this year any of us could have possibly imagined the stresses, strains and sacrifices that those in the nursing profession would have had to make this year. As you mentioned, they've got families as well that they worry about themselves as well as their jobs. So I just want to echo everything you've said and say an absolutely massive thank you to all of our staff across health and social care, whatever their role may be, but in particular the nurses who really are our front line, both defence and offensive against this virus. Thank you so much for everything that you are doing and will continue to do. We'll turn now to questions from the media, and first up I have Sam from Isle of Man Newspapers.
Good evening, Mr. I was wondering if we could start with, as we're talking about nurses, just as the health community starts to reopen again in terms of elective surgery and that sort of matters, how are things going to be integrated to move away from what is the current setup into that in terms of releasing nurses and doctors into other roles within the healthcare system again?
Well, I'll bring Kath in for anything she might want to say in a minute, but basically, being frank, it's going to be a balancing act. We've got to bring services online steadily. I think, as I've mentioned before, we can't go from having a service shut to suddenly having that service fully operational again. The staff that we've been using in the fight against COVID-19 are the same staff we need to run those services. So it is about getting a balance. And I know I always sound probably far too cautious for many people. That's one of the reasons I am, because we've got to start transferring staff across, but it's got to be done in a safe and managed way, because both patient safety and the well-being of the staff themselves is absolutely essential in doing that. But I'll bring Kath in case there's anything she would like to add.
Thank you, Minister. Yes, just want to echo what you've said. It is absolutely really important to begin to get our services back online, and we are planning that. Our management team are talking about that 3 times a week. We're mapping out our plans, but we will always have those competing priorities because COVID has got to become part of our business as usual. But yes, the message from me is that it is really important that we do begin to get services back online for those patients who require that care.
And I think the other thing I'd add as well, Sam, just before you move to your second question, is of course with health and social care, services don't operate in isolation either. Many of the services we've turned off are also dependent on other services. So as we bring those services back in, we've got to not just think about that particular service, but any other of the wider services that service relies on to ensure that the impact there is manageable as well. And your second question, Sam?
Yes, this afternoon the Chief Minister was asked about Abbotswood, and he referred to an independent party investigating, but then he referred to investigations as opposed to a single one. Will the department be undertaking its own investigations into the events at Abbotswood, and how much of that will be possible to be made public in the long term?
There is an independent investigation under the Registration and Inspections Act. I'll clarify why the Chief Minister referred to investigations in a moment. That is where an independent party has been appointed to conduct that investigation, because obviously DHSC has now had involvement in the home. So myself as Minister and the senior leadership group thought it was only right that we allow an independent party to conduct that, which is allowed under the Act, and that has been through the Attorney General's chambers for oversight. The reason the Chief Minister referred to investigations is obviously the safeguarding issues involved as well, and we have a separate safeguarding board on the Isle of Man, and there will obviously be investigations from the safeguarding side as well. So that's why the Chief Minister referred to investigations rather than investigation, because of the way it's split across the different bodies. In terms of public, sorry, I nearly forgot about that. In relation to R&I investigations, my understanding is they generally are made public. So personally, I would expect the end report to be made public as much as it possibly can be, but I would expect it to be a public report.
Yeah.
Next up, I have Tim from Manx Radio.
Faster, good evening, Minister. Just still on Abbotswood, I know 7 patients were transferred out today and there's more to come tomorrow. And I know it's down to the lease, but we've had a few of the families of people still there on today. One described his mum being as scared stiff this morning about being moved out, and another describing it disgraceful to treat people in their older years this way. Are you happy with this situation as it is? It's the best you can offer.
Tim, I'm far from happy with the situation. I think, as I stated yesterday, the ideal solution would have been to keep the residents precisely where they were, but we were unable, as I mentioned yesterday, to agree a lease with the building, with the owners. We can't operate out of a building without a valid lease in place and agreement over certain works that needed to take place as well, which also had not come to a satisfactory conclusion. So we had to make the choice that in terms of our duty of care to those residents, they needed to be moved. The absolute ideal solution would have been to leave them where they are. It is deeply unsettling. Abbotswood is those residents' homes, and many will have been there for quite a long time. So it will be unsettling for them to move, and in an ideal situation we wouldn't have had to, but we got to the point where the department believed that in order to actually comply with our duty of care to them, that was the solution that we had to go down.
And we've seen today and the past couple of days new cases in Wuhan, 100 new cases in South Korea in the nightclub area. Germany, new cases have nearly tripled today. So we know the dangers of easing the lockdown, but we're in a unique situation in some ways with relatively low numbers. And I'm interested in the comment now, we've got to live with it. But is it possible that we could try now a policy of eradicating COVID-19 on the island? Or is that just impossible? I'm thinking that would then lead to the economy being revived, and obviously that helps the NHS survive too.
Being blunt, eradication would be a dream, but unfortunately it is a dream. This is a virus, and until we've got a vaccine against it, eradication really, to be frank, is off the table. The only way you would even possibly be able to consider eradicating it on the island is if you locked everyone up for 21 days to make absolutely sure not only have they got over the incubation period but over the virus itself, and you shut the borders completely so nobody came in or out of the island. That would be the only way you would ever guarantee a complete eradication, so nothing in, nothing out, and that complete and utter lockdown with nobody moving for 21 days. That's not practical. With a virus, there is going to be low levels of it in one way or another. And you've mentioned there about what they've seen in Germany, what they've seen in Wuhan slightly, although that's a bit lower, and South Korea. This is why I do always sound like a broken record. It's very easy to slip into complacency mode. It's very easy to see us as bumbling along the bottom of that graph that keeps being shown of getting one case here, one case there. But I have to emphasise again, the reason we're in that position is because of the actions and the steps that have been taken. It's not luck, it's not chance. That is what has allowed us to be in this situation. So what we need to do is ensure that anything we do, we introduce changes gradually, we pause, we reflect, we looked at the impact of those changes, and then we move forward to the next step. And I know that's frustrating, and some people feel we're not moving fast enough, but it is the only way we can ensure that we don't end up in the situation of a second wave. Tim?
And can I just say chapeau to all the nurses as well on this day?
Most definitely. And next I've got Rob at 3FM.
Good evening, Minister. Both my questions are for Kath, please.
Certainly. First one, Rob, for Kath.
Hi, Kath. First off, once again, from all of us at 3FM, a massive thank you to yourself and all our island nurses for the extraordinary work that they're doing at this time. First off, as the Minister has said, this is a relentless situation. I can only imagine how physically and mentally exhausting it must be for all nursing staff at this time. I think this has come up in the past, but now that we're however many weeks into it, what sort of physical and mental support's available for nurses if they need it, if they feel sometimes that they could be feeling the strain of just a sheer amount of work that they have to go through?
Yes, we've done a number of things. Obviously, we've got our own occupational health department, but we've got a health and wellbeing service, which we've relaunched. We're advertising that. I've introduced 2 new matron posts. That was at the end of March. And the matrons are doing a lot of work on a daily basis, literally going around the hospital in particular, speaking to nurses, making sure that they're, getting refreshments and food. We've also made sure that they've got rest and comfort rooms in each area. So all sorts of different things, but we're very well aware that, the welfare of our staff is paramount. We've also just, initially we did put an embargo on all annual leave, but we've actually just last week said people can begin to take some annual leave if they want to take some rest. So yeah, it's one of our priorities, absolutely.
Thank you very much. My second question, you mentioned when you spoke before a little bit about education. Given the amount of unique and unprecedented circumstances that nurses are facing with the likes of redeployments and different procedures, how do you think this will affect the way nurses are trained on Ireland in the future?
Well, as you know, we've had nurse training for a long time, and I've actually got the students back into their placements because we did suspend student nurse training for about 6 weeks, I think. Well, maybe it was a bit less than that. But we have started them back into student nurse training on the 1st of May. I thought that was really important for planning long term. I have to say we've got excellent education facilities on the island, and what this has shown us is that some of our practitioners are absolutely excellent teachers in their specialist area, and we do need to harness that going forward. So I do think it's going to make educating our staff much easier.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. And next up, I've got Simon at Business 365 magazine.
Good evening, Minister. If I could put my first question to you, please. Dealing with the crisis full on has certainly been difficult and is one thing, but unravelling from it is going to be another. This is going to be obviously a very difficult time for government, as it's proving already in the UK. Are you confident that you can keep the public on side throughout this process?
I think we can. I mean, there is obviously frustrations out there, but I think what's important is communication, just as we're doing now with these press conferences. These press conferences, as far as I'm aware, are pretty new innovation for the Isle of Man each day, for us to be going out with the innovator, with the message. It's really innovative for us. And I think it's important and an opportunity for you guys in the media as well to question directly the ministers such as myself on what the latest thinking is and where we are going, and having that ability to challenge, because we are in exceptional times. It is going to be difficult to unravel. I think I stated at this podium last week that actually shutting things down is easy. Reopening things is where the hard part comes in, and doing it in a managed way so we don't end up with a spike in cases. So yeah, I think it is going to be exceptionally difficult, but the key, you're not going to please everyone, I should say, Simon. Every decision government makes is going to upset someone somewhere, but what's important is communicating why that decision has been made so people can understand the direction of travel. And of course, we've got the Stay Safe medium-term strategy that we recently released, which is a good read for anyone who wants to see the direction of travel going forward.
to Abbotswood. What is the future for it as a nursing home? Is there a possibility sometime in the future it could have its licence renewed and be back on stream? Or is this the end of the road, really?
So I can't speculate on that, Simon. There's investigations ongoing. We will have to see what comes out of those investigations.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, next up I've got Paul from MTTV. Good afternoon, or good evening, I should say, Paul.
Good evening, Minister. You obviously have a very busy day there in Tynwald. This morning I was down at Abbotswood watching the first patients, residents as they'd like to be called, being moved, and I was struck by the dedication of the staff who were generally moved to tears, I think, some cases, as they saw what they saw as almost their friends being taken away, and they felt really, down on the whole thing. You sort of chastised me yesterday saying you wouldn't be doing things in the media, you want to make sure they knew themselves. I'm talking about relatives before anybody else. So it's interesting, I've got a letter, an official letter here which says, and I'll quote, "We learned about the Department of Health and Social Security's decision to move our residents out of Abbotswood via a press release on Saturday afternoon. Neither we nor our staff were given advance notice of this decision." Your comments, please.
I assume that is from the owners of Abbotswood, then, the way you've just portrayed it. In relation to that, all I can say at this stage is that there have been constant conference calls between the Department of Health and Social Care and also the legal representatives of Abbotswood. That communication has been continuous and ongoing, and that's the only comment I can make at this point.
Sorry, so you're not confirming or denying what I've just said there?
There's independent investigations going on, Paul, and I've got to be very careful what I actually say while we've got investigations running with the home. What I can confirm is there has been continuous communication between DHSC and the legal representatives of Abbotswood over the various measures that have been taken.
Because at the end of the letter they say they've lodged an appeal to the suspension of the registration and will be challenging the DHSC's actions. Is that what you're referring to?
No, which is they're perfectly entitled to do. That provision is there in the legislation that if a licence is suspended, people quite rightly can challenge that suspension, and they are perfectly entitled legally to do so.
Thank you.
Okay, so then next up I've got Josh from ITV.
Thank you, Minister. Following on with Abbotswood, can you just go into a bit more detail into why the department couldn't agree on the lease that was put before you?
No, I can't. All I can actually say in relation to that is we were offered a short-term and a longer-term lease, the terms of which were not value for money for the taxpayer and just could not be accepted on the basis of the terms offered.
Okay, and in regards to the investigation, is there any kind of timeline, any idea of an end date on that at all?
Investigations have only just been started. What is important with any of these processes is not rushing to an end date, but ensuring it is done meticulously and in line with the legislation, and that is exactly what will be happening. We've appointed an independent party from the R&I side of it, and there's safeguarding investigations to be done as well, which is why the Chief Minister referred to investigations. They will be completed where in due course once it's been conducted correctly. It's more important to have the investigations done properly and fairly than it is to rush to an arbitrary timeline.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then last up I've got Chris Cave from Energy. You've waited very patiently, Chris.
Good evening, Minister. It was in the news recently that certain PPE bought by the UK government for NHS staff had failed safety tests. Could you confirm if and how protective equipment purchased by the Manx government is tested to make sure it's 100% safe?
Well, we undertake the same testing as the UK does. Most of the testing is referred to normally as fit testing. I'll let Kath come in if she wants to add to that in a moment. As far as I am aware, but I'll wait for Kath to correct me if I'm wrong, all the PPE that we've been ordered is up to grade. We did have about a month ago, I think, a stock of masks that weren't actually up to grade, but we were able to use them for other purposes because they failed the fit test. But we certainly are not in the position of the UK around PPE. As I think I've explained at this podium before, we have been sourcing from all over the world in order of our preparations, and we have ample supplies of what we require. But I'll bring Kath in.
Yes, we have a team that are monitoring our PPE, ordering our PPE, checking it when we get it, and we use a range of companies to test out masks, gowns that we've had, visors that we've had, because clearly the safety of our staff is the most important thing to us. So we have used a range of companies to test various items to make sure that they comply.
Thank you. And sticking with you, Kath, if I may, it feels to many as if we are beginning to get back to normality, obviously only very gradually at the moment, and we still have a long way to go, but it does appear the virus is somewhat under control here. How well equipped are we, were we to face a second wave of COVID-19 here? And will you be advising the government in any way to ensure that we are best prepared?
Yes, there is always that chance. If we, as the public, if our community don't comply with what the government have already asked, then we are at risk, as other countries, of having that second wave. But what we will do is we will monitor that in terms of the number of cases, and of course we will be advising Minister, Chief Minister, of what we need to do in terms of securing, again, going back into some type of further lockdown. But we are prepared, health services, but of course there is a threshold at which we cannot go above. And that's why over the next few months we're constantly going to be dealing with competing priorities.
And it goes back to what I said before, Chris, about a balancing act, that as we turn on all the services, not only have we got to make sure that those services are able to operate, but also that it doesn't damage any COVID-19 response that we still need to keep in place. Our biggest danger at the moment is complacency. I would say that is one of our biggest enemies, and it's important we don't get complacent. I'll take a couple of extra questions. One, Tim firstly, and then Paul, and then Rob.
Thank you, Minister. You say communication is key, but what's happening in Tynwald at the moment? Because some members are furious that they see a lack of opportunity to scrutinise the Council of Ministers at the moment. And we've had miscommunications about the promenade scheme, senior race day move, and measures and changes announced at this briefing rather than in Tynwald. What's the point of Tynwald at the moment?
Well, actually, Tim, if you look at it, the issue there's been, if anything, is the fact how things are fast moving. The Chief Minister and the Treasury Minister have both already covered off about the bank holiday. I spoke about it last Friday. In relation to that, we had to get it onto the Tynwald order paper ready for the June sitting, but unfortunately for the May sitting, because the bank holiday is before the next regular sitting at Tynwald. Unfortunately, we hadn't agreed the date by then. But the key thing is, in a pandemic, unfortunately, the ordinary processes don't work because things are moving fast. So, for instance, if you look at regulations, the regulations are done under the Emergency Powers Act. That's not something where you can just pause it and the regulations then get a good period of scrutiny before they come before Tynwald, because the Act states that the regulations have to be laid before Tynwald within 7 days or they lapse. So it does mean that the scrutiny period has been reduced. And one of the things I would like to put on record is actually the hard work and dedication of my Tynwald colleagues, who have been doing things where they would have a good period of scrutiny in a lot shorter period of time. So there has been engagement with Tynwald members over a lot of things. There's Tynwald presentations and briefings, which have been referred to when people have spoken. I myself and the Chief Executive of the department, Catherine, we do a weekly update briefing on a Thursday to Tynwald members. So there is conversations, there is discussions, and I know the feedback I've had is members find those briefings exceptionally helpful. I'll bring you back in, Tim, for your questions since we're on you anyway.
Yeah, well, we know that the state of emergency runs out, I think, on Friday, the 15th of May. What's the situation there? Are we going to continue with it, or will that now lapse? And the powers, I know, can still apply for another 6 months.
Well, first of all, the powers can apply for another 6 months if Tynwald approves them to continue. I need to be very clear on that. It's not a case of they just automatically continue. Under the Act, if they're not actually confirmed by Tynwald, they fall away. Personally, obviously, a couple of days to go yet, but I would expect that the state of emergency will need to remain in place for at least one more period. while we get everything ready, because the other thing about preparation is we've got to prepare for what comes after the state of emergency. So particularly, as you say, which regulations remain in place, which regulations fall away, what that impact is. It's not a quick job. And unless someone knows something I don't, I would expect that we may have to do at least one more period under the emergency. Okay,
Thank
Paul,
you.
next.
It's been left to me because I was waiting for somebody else to ask. Can you tell us more about this one new case, please? If it's nursing home related, or is it in elsewhere?
Well, I don't have the full details of that particular case with me today at the moment. But the one thing I can say is it's not nursing home related. It is a community case.
Thank you.
And Rob, you had.
Thank you.
one?
Just one quick question regarding the PPE. We're looking at the possibility, of course, nothing's confirmed yet. We could see shops and non-essential retail coming back from next week, depending on the climate. And then after that, some businesses may be allowed to start returning. With regards to the PPE stocks, if these businesses require them for whatever reason, how well can our stocks cope with being able to supply them and our medical staff?
Well, the first thing I need to say, Rob, is we won't be supplying them. They're private businesses. It'll be for them to source their PPE if that's what they require to keep their staff safe to operate. They will not be DHSC. I want to squash that straight away. While we may assist dentists if they come back online, as we've mentioned, at cost, we are not going to be doing that for the whole economy. It is just not practical for us to do so. And I don't know if Kath wants to add anything onto that.
No, Minister, I think you've answered the question.
Okay, well, thank you very much to our media partners, as always, and particular thanks for them waiting around so long for me to finish in Tynwald and get here. Florence Nightingale was a prolific writer of papers and studies, and also very good to quote from. So, although scientifically driven, she saw nursing as an art, and she said, "And if it is to be made an art, it requires an exclusive devotion, as hard a preparation as any painter's or sculptor's work." That, I think, captures what nursing today requires: careful study, technical skill, meticulous attention to detail, devoted practice, consideration for others, and an absolute dedication to the job. Thank you to all of our nursing colleagues in the island. I hope you have enjoyed reflecting on your profession and continue to feel supported by the Manx public. Happy International Nurses Day, and also, of course, Happy Year of the Nurse as well. Now on to today's shout-outs. Firstly, Tanya Linden, a manager in acute mental health, has been nominated by her team. She has worked with relentless positivity since the pandemic began and has been ensuring people who are mentally ill continue to receive the best care. Alongside this, she is also caring for the welfare of staff and boosting morale. Her fairness, integrity and enthusiasm has been remarkable. So thank you, Tanya, for all that you've been doing and everything that you continue to do. Secondly, the residents of Farrants Park, Castletown, they held a VE Day social distancing street party and have raised £300 for the Isle of Man NHS. So thank you to all the residents. Finally, I have also been asked by several people to give a shout out to the patient transfer and air ambulance service teams that have been doing all that they can at these difficult times. Several people have been in touch with me to praise the work they have been undertaking to facilitate people still being transferred across for treatment and ensuring that they get back safely as well. So thank you very much to the teams in patient transfer and air ambulance service who continue to look after our travelling patients. So that's it for today. But in closing, again, happy International Nurses Day. And remember, stay at home where you can and stay safe. Thank you very much.
Today is International Nurses Day on the Isle of Man.
And we want to say a big thank you to all our island nurses and carers. So,
to all our island nurses.
For all our island nurses.
To all our island nurses.
To all your island nurses.
To all our island nurses.
To all our island nurses.
To all our island nurses.
To our island nurses.
To all our island nurses.
To all our island nurses.
To all our island nurses.
To our island nurses.
To all 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 our island nurses.
To our island nurses and frontline service staff.
To all of our island nurses.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wharf and Cockmichael. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
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 Thank you to our nurses and our carers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Boo.